Hi, I'm Chris, and this is the first day of Jamuary25. And in the background you can hear the start of my first patch. It sounds ominous. I like the soundscape a lot. Okay, so today we're gonna dive into this patch and dissect it a little. I'll try to explain my thought process behind what I did and why I did it. So let's go. We have 4 voices, which are represented by these 2 mixers. The stereo mixer only has 3 channels, so I added another mixer that added the 4th channel. And to link those mixers, you just take the stereo output of the first mixer and add it to the second mixer. In this case I also added a filter in between to get rid of the low end, because I wanted that very low bass drum to not have anything in the low frequencies to compete with, because it rings out quite long. So let's solo that. So depending on your system or where you're listening to this video, you might not even hear that. It's what is it, C1? So roughly 33 Hertz, roundabout. Alright. The second thing you can already hear is this dystopian soundscape. And that's how the patch has started actually. Let's turn down the kick drum. So this is spline curve, and I just randomized a bunch until I found a waveform that I liked. And then I added modulation and some post-processing. In this case it's a chorus and a micro diffuser, which is kind of a reverb, but not really. It's the first part of a reverb. Maybe let's bypass the chorus. Okay, now it's mono on the left channel because it's not duplicated anymore. So let's do this real quick. So as you can hear, the chorus is doing a lot. It's 3 voices, well technically 2.99 voices, and there's actually a reason to this madness. The way the voices work is that if it's in between, let's say in between 2 and 3 voices, you have to process 2 voices and the 3rd voice, and that stacks. So if I put it to 3 exactly, then it would have to process 3 voices plus the 4th, because it's starting to interpolate between the 3rd and the 4th. So if you want to save on a few CPU cycles, just go right below the number of voices you want. It most of the time doesn't matter, just a neat little power trick. Well, chorus speed, chorus depth. I think the main idea here was to get a diffused sound. So I added quite standard modulation speed. Guess what is the default? Oh, it is literally the default. I turned the modulation depth a bit up. If we do that more, it gets a little bit swarmy. So let's put it down again. So the more voices, the more effect. To give it a bit of space, there's this micro diffuse. It's actually not doing that much, but if I turn down, you can hear the ringing out. It's a bypass. Gives this nice dark metallic resonant room tone. And I like that. What actually brings this atmosphere to life is the various modulation. And I tried to visualize the modulation with these bar scopes, which are a great way to have a look at all the moving parts in the patch. In this case, I'm doing phase distortion in X and Y direction, and I use the built-in amplifier as well. So of course, main part is the amplifier. You turn the level down to roughly 0, and then you can use the CV input and the accompanying attenuator to control the output level. I'm using an AD envelope, which is directly clocked by a clock module set to 2/1 tempo, so very slow. The AD envelope has a very soft attack and a very long decay. And you can see the AD envelope moving in this bar scope. The envelope doesn't even finish, it resets before the decay rings out. But that doesn't matter. And that is directly connected to level. So next, phase distortion. The main part of the sound is actually this X direction. If we cancel the Y modulation, sound changed just a bit, so let's re-enable that. Here I'm doing some fun things. The AD envelope actually has 2 channels, and I use the second channel, which receives the same trigger as the level CV-AD, and I put that through an amplifier to control the phase distortion X amount. And the amplifier is controlled by an LFO. And now you can see how this plays out in this bar scope. Depending on where the LFO is in its cycle, I get more or less. And it's a bit jittery because I have this LFO set to some noise. But it's not really... It is noise. It's just not noise that you can hear as noise. What the hell? It's not noise that you can hear as noise because it's smoothed out due to the smoothing setting in this LFO. Second modulation, phase distortion in Y direction. That is just a plain LFO. Even more noise mixed in, and you can see in the bar scope it's a bit jittery here and there. That is the noise that is also smoothed, but not as much as this LFO. Never mind, moving on. The big star next to this dystopian atmosphere in this patch is the bass drum. And it's as simple as it gets. It's just a micro bass drum module. Turned the octave down. Gave it some pitch drop, pitch dive. Long decay and lots of distortion. If you turn down the distortion, it's very boring. Might not be even able to hear it. But if we add some drive, we get this nice harmonics on the bass drum that makes it audible on speaker systems that are usually not able to reproduce these low frequencies. So if you're listening on your smartphone or your laptop speakers, you should be able to hear just a little bit of hint. And due to psychoacoustics, you can then reproduce the bass tone in your head. In theory, at least. Well, I guess you won't hear that much. So let's bring in the atmosphere. And let's get over to the next tone. Or element. And that is this crusty, sizzling bass line. Let's get rid of everything else. Hear it in isolation. So the rhythm is straightforward. It's a Euclidean rhythm generator that is triggered by a clock set to 1/2. And the Euclidean sequence is 3/8 with an offset of 3. And that just triggers the AD envelope. You can hear there is a pulsing, and that is because there is a second AD envelope that is triggered by another channel of the clock. It's 1/8. And this second AD envelope is what actually controls the level, but it goes through an amplifier again with the same triggers we had with the LFO modulating the level before, but this time the long AD envelope that is triggered by the Euclidean module is controlling the overall envelope, and that's why you get the mix. It's not a mix, it's a product of these two envelopes. So it's pulsing, but it's decaying according to the first envelope. And that is controlling the first FM operator, which in that case is the carrier. It's the modulator that is phase modulating the carrier. And that amplifier, the amplifier of this FM operator is controlled by the same trick basically. It's also the pulse here, and it's the second channel of the AD envelope that's controlling the amplifier, which is then again gated by this Euclidean module. So you can see in these Sparscope visualizations, it's the same pulse, but it's slightly different, because we have different attack times on the overarching AD envelope attack, and also it decays more quickly. What makes the sound, or gives it the crunch, is this lo-fi delay. Let's bypass that for a second. Okay, same issue, it's just mono left. Still a cool sound, but the crunch just really gives it this lo-fi dystopian feeling. Lo-fi delay is a nifty little delay that has sample rate reduction and bit crusher in the feedback path. And it's compensated, so you get the delay time. Fun things happen though if you modulate either the delay time or the bit reduction, the sample rate reduction. You can even disable the compensation. And you can hear the delay is going crazy now. It's not going to any tempo because we modulate the sample rate reduction with a slow moving LFO, and this LFO has an attenuator and an offset built in, so we have really low level here, just a small something to give it some movement. Let's re-enable compensation for the reduction. the noisy part actually comes from the sample rate reduction jitter. So it's not straight doing the same reduction every time. It's jittery a bit. There's a few samples to the left and right, and that gives it this noisy character. Plus, it's a very hefty bit depth reduction. We're reducing it to 4 bits, which is in itself quite noisy. So if we turn down the bit depth to 16 bits, still noisy. Get rid of the jitter. Lovely sing and sample rate reduction sounds. If we reduce bit depth again, get this nice noise crunch when the signal level gets low. Feels like some old digital gear dying. Let's give it some jitter again. And the fun thing about this jitter is that it is stereo noise, which gives it a nice little touch of stereo. We mixed that in quite low with a decent amount of feedback. And that is this bass line. In context, so to me this feels like the kick drum or the bass drum is marching through this dystopian landscape. And then there's this pulse, this ominous pulse that is disintegrating into noise. I think that's a great contrast to the soundscape and adds to the rhythmic complexity. Because there's the Euclidean sequence, which makes it sound less repetitive than the kick drum, just a fair bit, and the delay is set to 3/8, which is like dotted quarter notes, which adds to the rhythmic complexity. So let's go with the last overmend. Again, that's a noisy FM patch or FM voice. We do Euclidean sequencing again. That's again clocked from this clock module. It's kind of the tempo brain here. So quick little excursion. What I often like to do in patches is I have a button and a clock, and that's how I start these patches if I'm not going from an idea, because this allows me to have different clock sources at different speeds that control envelopes, sequencers, triggers, other stuff in the patch. But things get out of sync real quick. So that's why I have this button here that is connected to the reset, retrigger and sync inputs of some things. The clock module, because if I change speeds on this clock, it's not in sync anymore. Just quick push of the button, all 4 clock outputs in sync. And of course, if I have these Euclidean sequences, they have internal counters that advance the sequence per received trigger. But if I want a consistent state, just one push of the button, clocks are in sync, sequence are running from the start, everything is set up. Alright, back to the last voice, Mother FM voice. There's the trusty micro FM operator and a second one. And this time it's not actually FM in the classic sense. because that is actually phase modulation, like the DX7 style. This time it's actual FM, linear through zero FM, which does sound very familiar. And if you're only dealing with sinusoidal signals, it is almost the same, but it's a bit different character. And I make use of that in this patch, because the linear FM here is less strong than the phase modulation. Let's compare that real quick. Compared to linear FM, sounds just a bit smoother. Alright, where do I start? Let's see. In this case, the modulator, this is the modulator, this is the carrier. Modulator has nothing fancy happening to it. The amplifier is fed by a DC source. The module is so small we couldn't fit a level knob on there, so if nothing is connected, full level. If amp is connected, the level that's here at the amplifier CV jack is what dictates the overall output level. So if I want a level knob, I just connect the DC source and then I can control the level. So here, a good dose of FM. The carrier, set up almost the same. Frequency ratio here is 7. Odd ratio, here it's 2. That's just to have a higher octave. Could have done the same with setting it to 1 and getting 1 volt of DC. Oh, not in the flanger, here in the pitch CV input. Essentially equivalent, but that was just a quicker way to set it up. A little bit of patch history. I set up this FM patch and the effects and everything before I set up the sequence, the melodic sequence. So at the beginning there was nothing connected to this pitch CV inputs. That's why it was easier to have the ratio set higher. Another fun thing that enables us to do is if we have ratio 2 here and we have ratio 7 here, that's different as if we had ratio 1 and yeah, we can't set 3.5 here. So, fun little trick to get odd ratios. Just up the ratio of the modulator and the carrier. So that's 4, for instance. It's 2 octaves up. Alright. There's feedback on both the carrier and the modulator. And on the carrier, it is even modulated by an envelope to give it a little bit more expression. Accentuate this decaying state. And this oscillator, the carrier then goes through some FX. There's a flanger and again a lo-fi delay that adds some grit. Let's disable flanger. And as you can hear, a lot more static. Re-enable flanger. Flanger gives it a little bit of movement, and since it's a stereo effect, the flanging is offset, it also gives it a little bit of stereo width. And then there is this lo-fi delay, if we disable that. Yeah, it's quite boring. The rhythmic complexity is gone and the grid is gone, because again, we have set it to a quite boring 1/4 time. gives it this stomping, marching feel. And we have again degraded the signal with sample rate reduction. We're modulating sample rate reduction for this little bit of wonkiness. We're again introducing a fair bit amount of jitter. And this time we're not going that much down with the dip path, because if you do that, well, it does actually sound cool, but it does not ring out that much. Because of 4 bits, there's not much wiggle room with very quiet signals, so it's either on or off. Good dose of feedback, and we mix that in cautiously. That plays very well with the bass line. Almost forgot melody. That's a scale decrease sequencer. I set it to C minor. You can see the pitch CV of the spline curve and the kick drum, and the bassline oscillators isn't connected. Standard tuning is roughly C2. Oh, not roughly, it's exactly C2. So I stay in a C scale, and this is a C minor scale decrease sequencer. I want the tonic, so the first degree the most. I want a little bit of second, the supertonic, because if you have this the first and the second tone of the scale and you alternate that, it's a bit an ominous feeling, because it's a very odd interval. Odd sounding interval, I should say. It's not actually odd. I have the dominant, the fifth a bit, because I like to have that in there. Sevenths and octave, also a fair bit. Oh, well, not fair bit, just a little bit. For some melodic interest. To make this pledge playable, I have my MIDI controller connected, and as you can see on the left side, I have mapped some of the controls. I have mapped various levels. For the atmosphere, I have not mapped the mixer, what I usually do, because that's the most simple thing to do, but I have actually mapped the level of the CV attenuator for the level CV, because if I turn that down, oscillator output is silent. And since this is going through chorus, and no feedback on the chorus, but since this is going through a diffuser, which has tons of feedback, the signal isn't simply cut off when I turn down the level, but it rings out a bit and sounds just a bit smoother when I crank the knob. Same goes for the bass line. I have mapped this level CV attenuator for the amplifier that's controlling the carrier. And that's so that the delay can ring out. Again, if I had connected this to the, or mapped this to the mixer channel, I would cut away the delay instantly. And this way it can ring out nicely. I did not do that for the keys, lead line, whatever it is. And you can hear if I cut the mixer channel, all of the delay is gone. It sounds a bit more abrupt, a bit more harsh, but since this is just the lead line and other stuff is playing, it's not that noticeable. I did the same for the kick drum. Because there is not much going on. Sometimes instead of muting the mixer channel or the output of the bass drum, kick drum, or whatever drum sound, I instead mute the trigger input. Because if the drums do not receive triggers, they do not play. But they play out their currently received trigger. That can be more natural, especially if you have cymbals, snares, or this long ringing kick drum, bass drum. In that case, I decided against that, because I wanted full control over the level. And I guess that's it for this patch. Ah, forgot. I have some more controls MIDI mapped. More phase distortion shenanigans. I have the phase distortion squeeze of spline curve, which adds more high frequency content and makes the sound appear more in high in frequency. I guess the closest thing to what's happening is format shifting. And during the jam I used that quite a lot to build interest, to introduce other elements. I also have phase distortion bend, which you can see in the visualizer, bends the waveform to the left or right. Just alters the sound a little bit. It's more pronounced. If we have some squeeze. But yeah, that's about it. Okay, I have the redux of the lead lines, lo-fi delay also mapped. I don't even think I used that in the patch. I just thought it would be cool. As you can see, it was the first control that I mapped. But for this first patch I tried to keep it simple. So I mostly mapped levels and some high level timbre control. But since this patch is running, let's have some fun. Randomize spline curve waveform. Oh, that sounds cool as well. Ooh. That's a cool one as well. Maybe double the cables which is the same as multiplying the signal by 2, so that we can drive the spline curve into its clipper on the output. There's a whole nother jam starting. Alright. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this pitch dissection and the explanations. If you have any more questions, if I forgot to explain anything, let me know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe. Thanks a lot and see you tomorrow. Bye then.